Hi, and thank you for joining us here at Tax Talk UK, where we talk about all things tax and consider other important aspects of working for yourself, running a small business, being self-employed. So today we're going to talk about how long to keep business records. Before we do, if I could please ask you to take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you will easily be able to refer back to this information should you need to, as well as finding other information on a whole wide range of topics, all aimed at supporting you in your self-employment. So back to how long to keep business records then. So before I explain how long, I just want to be clear that I'm talking about your accounting records. So, for example, some legal documents you may need to keep for up to 10 years. But I'm purely talking today about your accounting records. So I'm talking about your bank statements, your sales invoices, and your purchase invoices, receipts, and basically all the paperwork that backs up that the accounts that you have submitted. So another thing to bear in mind is the exact timescale will depend on your trading style. So if you are trading as a sole trader, for example, the time limit goes from the 31st of January following the end of the tax year that the records relate to. So that, of course, you will recognise as being the deadline for the tax return, and you must keep your records for 5 years from that date. So let's remember, though, that that date is 9 months after the end of the tax year. So we're talking really six years from the end of the tax year that you would need to keep the whole tax year's records. If you are trading as a micro-entity limited company, then you will need to keep your accounting records for 6 years from the end of the financial year that the records relate. So this, of course, it's quite complex and hard to remember the sort of specific detail like that. But if you consider you keeping your records for 6 years, then of course that will overcome. Another thing to mention is that some people keep things like their supplier statements or their remittance advices from those customers. So these aren't things that are mandatory to retain. These aren't things that prove that you've spent money and claimed money as business expenses or sales. These are just to sort of I guess to help you keep your accounts tidy. So there's no need to keep all of that type of information for the required time. Just the actual accounting records, so your sales invoices, your purchase invoices, your receipts, and your bank statements, other things that would back up how you've come about the figures that you have submitted on your accounts for your profit and loss. So those are the things that you need to keep. So let's just have a little think about then if you are keeping your records digitally, which of course, especially in light of Making Tax Digital, we're sort of entering the digital era. A lot of people are now using software to sort of photo recognize their invoices, their receipts, for example, and they are keeping the information on there. So let's think about sales invoices, for example, where you perhaps generated them digitally within your software. So quite often people wonder whether they should be printing those or what they should be doing in terms of retaining them. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a mandatory time limit that you are required to keep your sales invoices. So as long as they are accessible digitally, then this is absolutely fine. There's no need to necessarily print them off. And of course, in these days, as we move more towards cloud software rather than the desktop software, where perhaps your data could be more vulnerable, because if you have a problem with your software, then you could lose the data. When it's in the cloud, obviously it's much more secure. But the thing to remember is, of course, your access to that data is still reliant on your subscription and you paying the license fee to your software provider. So all of the software providers behave slightly differently when you come to the end and you no longer need the subscription, but they all have some sort of period of time where you can access the records after your subscription ends, but you just can't modify them. So say, for example, if we're looking at a generous provider who allows you access to your records for a year afterwards, just bear in mind that you have to keep the records for potentially 6 years, 7 years, of course, if they fall at the start of the tax year or the financial year. So if say, for example, you cancel your subscription, then for the next year you have access to it. But if you've always used that software and all your records are on there, once that year ends and your records are no longer accessible, then you need to sort of think about how you would retain those. So you are committing yourself to your software provider, and by only having that information available there. So it's quite, again, not necessarily needing to print everything off. It is quite easy from all of the software providers to simply download either a CSV or individual invoices. So that's no problem, but it's just something to bear in mind. Then if we think about purchase invoices and receipts that you're perhaps scanning or snapping into photo recognition software, and then quite often people are then shredding the original hard copy, and again, that's fine as long as that remains accessible. And so whether that is going directly into your MTD software, or if you're using a sort of third-party software that's actually doing the digital reading and pushing it forward, again, you just need to bear in mind that you still require to keep the records for the mandated time. So whether you decide to, you've already got the hard copy, whether you just decide to keep those as a backup, or whether you then download digitally onto your own computer folders a copy. But as I say, you do need to keep the records for the mandated amount of time, and so as long as they are accessible, then that is fine for them to be held digitally. The thing that you need to maybe put yourself in the position is if you are in an inspection with a HMRC officer and they ask you for a specific record within the time scale, are you going to be able to easily provide that? If the answer is yes, then that is absolutely fine. If the answer is no, because I no longer have access to the software, or I haven't kept the records, then that is a problem. And you should not worry if you've not been keeping the required records to this point, but just make sure that going forward that you are doing things correctly. Because of course, as we know, being self-employed, working for yourself is a learning curve. So it is completely understandable that we're not all going to know everything right from day one. We will learn things as we go along. And the important thing is that once we learn them, and we know that something is mandated and something that we must be doing, that we start doing it from that point. So hopefully this helps you to understand effectively, if you keep your records from 6 years from the end of the period that they relate, whether you're a sole trader or a micro entity, that this should cover you, and then you don't necessarily need to know the exact date that you must keep them for, and hopefully that will help you to keep the records for the right amount of time. So thank you very much for watching. If you found this information helpful, please do take the time to like the video, and that just helps us to really understand what content is the most helpful, and which questions we should be focusing on to answer in our videos. Thank you. Goodbye.